Hi, this is guitarist Denis Taaffe, and I want to welcome you to another edition of Bargain Bin Gear. And this is the highly anticipated Meris Enzo Part 2. And basically this is the Meris Enzo with Midi, okay, which is also the name of my cat, Midi. But in this case, we're connected the Meris Enzo to Midi. So I'm going to go through my real-world experience with this endlessly fascinating and frustrating pedal, without a doubt. Not for the faint of heart, surely. I had been in contact with Meris support, and they've been very helpful. Because this pedal is really great, but at the same time it's really pretty confusing and difficult to use, really. But the trade-off is amazing synthesizer sounds. So much so, at some point you've got to question whether are you a guitarist or are you a synthesizer player. That's what I discovered anyway. Okay, first let's talk about the Meris Enzo guitar synthesizer pedal and what it takes to hook it up to MIDI. And basically, I mean, I had already a MIDI foot controller, right? Which, by the way, I've yet to hook up to the Meris Enzo. And that'll be so I can hit, buttons and call up presets on the Meris Enzo. So what does it take to do that? Well, one of the simplest ways, if you don't have a MIDI controller, is probably a disaster area design, I think it's called. Little microcontroller, about a little pedal like that, and you can go through presets that way. But that's not all. Not only do you need a MIDI controller, but you need something called the Meris I/O. And the Meris I/O is a little tiny pedal, right? Little black pedal, and basically it has MIDI in and out, and that's very important because usually, a lot of these little MIDI boxes, right, only have out. So this accepts MIDI in and sends MIDI out, and very importantly, it does it through a TRS cable, okay, which is needed. That's what the Meris Enzo uses to communicate with MIDI. What does that translate to? Well, basically, pretty much another $100. Really, is really what it amounts to, right? And I thought, man, that's kind of expensive for just a little, MIDI I/O box. Now, granted, it's good for 4 Meris pedals, and I don't know if it'll work with other pedals or not. I've never actually tried that. It's possible. Well, anyway, I found one, for a little less than $100, luckily. I had ordered it, and before I had gotten the Meris Enzo, and it was a real gamble, because if I didn't keep the pedal, I'd be stuck with this little Meris I/O box. That I'd have to resell or return, one of the two. And in fact, I have to be honest, there were several times where the Meris Enzo had great sound. I was getting terrible tracking, and the damn thing wouldn't stay in tune. Right? There's nothing worse than that. So in other words, to actually use it musically, not just create sounds, but to use it musically, you know, in my looping things, I mean, you know, it has to be in tune, right? And I was going, what's going on here? So I was trying to use the pitch, right? The pitch knob, you know, it goes down an octave, up an octave, or right in the middle, right? It's supposed to be unison. It's supposed to be, you know, if I change the mix to the guitar and the synth sound should be the same. Well, it wasn't doing that, and it was driving me crazy. And I thought, oh, this pedal's got to go. But here's what I discovered. It turns out your guitar not only has to be in tune, right, but I believe it has to be at the right pitch. A440, right? So I realized my guitar was like A flat, E flat, and stuff like that, right? You know, pretty much playing in E flat. And, well, the Meris Enzo just said, no, that's not working. That's not going to work. So that's very important. So in other words, you've got to play, you know, not only in tune, string-wise, but pitch-wise, too. Right? So, you know, luckily for me, I had, you know, all these pedals pretty much these days, especially the multi-effects ones, have built-in tuners. So no problem. So I did that, and all of a sudden, there we go. Now, when I drop an octave and I change the mix to 50-50, 50% guitar, 50% synth, it's in tune. Well, there you go. And this also very much affected the tracking, surprisingly. Right? And I was having terrible tracking problems. Going, man, this is terrible. The worst tracking I think I've ever played. And I think that had a lot to do with it. Now, granted, the Meris Enzo pedal, right, especially in poly mode, you know, is not the greatest tracking. And what I mean by tracking is when you play a note that it plays it accurately, you know, and doesn't glitch or, you know, play it sound down or so on. Now I talked to Meris about this, the tracking, and it's pretty good, actually. I mean, it's usable, definitely. Whereas before, when I had it, you know, mistuned and things, man, it wasn't usable. So I was glad about that. What they suggested in poly mode is to use the sustain button, right, which helps a lot with the tracking as far as when you release a chord and a note and that kind of thing. One little issue with that is when you use the sustain, well, the sound just goes on and on and on and on, you know. It's almost as if you're holding down the hold button or something, you know, where it would hold a note out for a really long time. And that can be good, that can be bad, it depends, you know. So I had a kind of an issue with that. But tracking-wise, it was getting a lot better. Now, back to the Meris Enzo Midi I/O. So I went ahead and ordered this thing. And like I said, I had real misgivings of spending almost another $100 for MIDI capabilities. But this pedal is so good sound quality wise, and what it's able to do, and what it brings to my music, really, it's worth it. Now, beyond that, we're still not done. If you still want MIDI capability, right? Especially with the computer software. And here's the deal. Meris sent me a couple links to some editors, right? And you remember, the Meris Enzo has 16 presets that you can write to and save and access, Okay, and so they do that with online software. And one of them required Windows 10, and my cruddy old computer is still running Windows 7, so that was out of the question. That didn't work. You know, I have other computers, and maybe I'll put Windows 10 on one of those. I don't know. Probably. But another solution is if you have Chrome, all right, for PCs, the Chrome browser. Well, there's another editor, and I'll put a link to it in the description. It's studiocode.dev Enzo editor, and unfortunately I'm not sure who created it, but it's very good. Now this gave me some hope, right? And there are still many limitations they have to work with. Okay? And one of those is, besides the MIDI I/O box, right, you also need a MIDI in and out connection to your computer. Now, some people have, you know, an audio interface that usually has MIDI in and out. So you could probably use that, I would assume. Or like me, of course, my audio editor is on a separate computer, so I can't use it for that. I mean, I have to bring it over and do all that stuff. Luckily for me, I had a very inexpensive Yamaha USB to MIDI adapter. And so it has MIDI in and out to a USB plug. So I popped that in. Just set the Meris Enzo to channel 16 MIDI-wise, and set the software to channel 16. And my experience was very simple, really, to connect. You think it'd be... I tell you, using the pedal is harder than the MIDI connections, I thought. You know, and it does work reliably and pretty good. Now, this browser is very nice because one of the big complaints with the Meris Enzo is that you've got the knobs on the front, but if you hold down the Alt button, guess what? You have those knobs do different things, right? You have a second function on all those knobs. You know, plus you have 6 filter types, right? And the different programs and things. And then you also have a global setup, right? Where you can change not only the MIDI channel, if you want trails on or off, and that kind of stuff. And if you want line level or instrument level, right? Well, all that's addressed with the software, and it's all on one page, right in the browser. So that was really, really, really helpful. In other words, going through, you've got pitch, portamento, filter, filter type, mix, delay level, sustain, ring mod, filter envelope, filter cue, modulation, delay feedback, and then going down, you also have tempo, of course, triggered, envelope type, which is triggered or follower, synth, dry, ARP, mono, poly, saw, square, right? Those are the 2 different waveforms. And then a nice feature here is expression pedal. So on every preset, you have, if you have got a, with the software, you don't even need an expression pedal connected to the Enzo, but you can move that lever and see what it would be like if you did. It gives you a different sound, or variations on the sound depending on how high you go on the imaginary pedal in the software. Right, so if you had a pedal, you could control it. That way it would do the same thing. So took me a little bit to set it up a little bit, but not bad, not really bad at all. And you know it's working when you click one of the presets, but also when you move a knob on the Enzo pedal, it moves it in the software. This should make the Enzo a lot easier to use and come up with really cool sounds that you like. So I went through the 16 presets, factory presets, right? And they were a good starting point. You know, some of them were really good, some were kind of like, you know, sound effects, things. Which is cool to be able to do that, you know, but musically it doesn't, not all that useful, you know. It depends, I guess, on the situation. But in most cases, not all that musical. So, and there's still some things on the Meris Enzo software that I haven't really explored yet. So it can do some pretty interesting things considering the limitations. And what am I talking about, limitations of the software? Well, it's got 16 presets, right? So you click on preset 1, it brings up preset 1, right? Simple enough. And let's say you really like that preset, right? Really cool preset. Well, with this software, if you make changes in the software or using the knobs, and then you want to save that preset, well, you have to save it to that same location. You can't say, okay, I want to save this one as preset 13, right? No, you have to save it back to preset 1, overriding the existing preset that was there. Now, makes no sense, of course, but that's one of the limitations. Now, there are ways around that, and one of them, the simplest one, really, you know, is that you can save it as a sysx file and then load it up. You can do it that way, so you can have a list of presets. Very much kind of like a Line 6 modeler, you know, the pod series would do. You know, you'd have little presets. There'd be a file, and you load it up, and there you go. That's one way. Now, another way, I guess, there's a print. But I guess you can print that out. I don't know if it prints to a file or not. I haven't tried it. Another way to do it is just use on the keyboard, right? Use the print screen button. And then use your paint program, right? And it'll show you your settings, right? Because it's basically a, you know, picture of the screen, you know, and your settings for that particular sound. And then you can save that as a file and bring it up in Paint and then, you know, do the same settings. So that's another way to do it if you want to. It's kind of bizarre. Okay, here's the other thing. This pedal is just, it's too loud. And that's the one thing that I wish they would fix, and supposedly they have on the newer Meris Enzo pedals. Unfortunately, mine, of course, has to be an older one, so it doesn't have this modification. But you can send the pedal in, and they'll do the modification. And all it is a 6 dB, up to 6 dB cut on the mix knob, you know, near the 190 to 100, I think is what it was. Will control the volume a bit. That would be extremely helpful for me, because it really is too loud many times. Now, of course, your settings will, you know, affect that volume. And there's several ways around that. But they're not great. One is, I have an Eventide pedal where you can control the volume. So if you're on a preset, I could create a preset just for the Meris Enzo, you know, and control the volume that way. That's one possibility. Another one, of course, is a stereo volume pedal, right? So you can control the volume that way. And a lot of it has to do with the mix knob, too, can control the volume a little bit. So that's a real limitation, and I really hope that Meris will figure out a way to give you a real volume mix knob. And I don't mean guitar, right? A volume knob. Especially one that you could set on each preset. It seems like a no-brainer, really, you know. And this has been a complaint of people, you know, for a long time, which is why they did the modification with a 6 dB cut. But it's a global, right? And I suppose with MIDI, you know, you can have that mix knob, probably send it, you know, a CC message rather than a program change, just to control that mix knob, or assign an expression pedal to it, you know. But don't forget, you know, if you don't have that modification, then all you're doing is, you know, lowering the volume. But as you do, you're bringing up the guitar signal, which many times you don't want to hear, because you just want to hear the synthesizer sound. So there's definitely some limitations, and I hope that even if it's just software based, a volume mix knob is just essential, you know. So those two areas, you know, the presets and the volume, are the Achilles heel of this pedal, without a doubt. Okay, now here's another thing I found using this pedal, is that in the dry mode, right, where it really changes the synthesizer to kind of a pitch shifter, how good the delay in the filters are. And I'll show you that in one of the presets here that I've made. So now here's another thing. This particular software has a randomize function, if you can believe it. And what the randomize function is, instead of you just trying out different knobs, which is how you get presets, it will do that for you. And so just by clicking the randomize button, you get a different sound. If you don't like that sound, click it again, and it'll keep randomizing these things. And you may run across a sound that's really great, or that you can tweak to make it the sound that you want, you know. Or sometimes they're horrible, you know, so you click it again. And then you can save that as a preset. But if you do that, remember to be on a preset that you don't mind overriding. You know, it's very confusing. I think the only other multi-effect that was as confusing was the Lexicon MX400. Where you've got two different effects processors, and you think you've saved the preset that you really like, only to discover, no, you have to save two different ones because it only saves the one you're on. In other words, if you dial up, you know, effect 53, and you think you're going to get the sound that you've set up, you're only going to get half of it, and the other one, right, won't be set to anything. They are truly independent, and that is so confusing, you know. And this is the only pedal that I've ever run into that's really, man, has some limitations, you know. And I hope with a firmware update or something that they could set a mix level, you know, volume level. You know, that would be fantastic, because then on every preset you could, you know, decide what volume you want it at. You know, not just a mix, right, of your guitar and the synthesizers. So those are the limitations. Now, I did find it extremely useful, and it really does work well. I mean, the MIDI does work as it's intended, as I expected it to work. You know, there were no weird glitches or that kind of thing. And before I get off the subject, the Meris Midi I/O that I purchased, right, for this pedal came in, and I was surprised. And now I see why maybe it cost $89. Because this wasn't a flimsy piece of plastic, you know what I mean? I mean, this was a heavy-duty metal pedal. You know, I was surprised. Really. Really surprised. And just like any other pedal, it requires the 9-volt power, and I don't mean a little battery, you know. I mean a 9-volt, you know, power from the, you know, if you've got a pedal board or that kind of thing. You know, almost like, you know, like a Boss pedal or whatever. And I also noticed that there's little tiny LEDs on it, and they light up, right? And so letting you know that the MIDI, I think, is working. I guess I'm not quite sure, or if it's just when it's communicating. I'm not sure on that. Anyway, in other words, I found that it was worthwhile. You know, it was definitely worthwhile. It's small, but it's quite sturdy. You can feel how sturdy it is. Okay, so here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to go through some of these presets for you that I've come up with. And mind you, I've done this a couple times already. I've gone through, saved some presets, and then found something better, and I thought, well, you know, why keep that? So for right now, till I get this volume issue saved, or resolved, and that's another thing. The mod I was talking about with the 6 dB cut on the mix knob, right? You have to send the pedal in to have it done, unless you get one of the newer pedals that already has it built in. Of course, mine doesn't. Wouldn't you know? But here's the thing that sucks, is that Meris has put all doing modifications on hold because of the virus. Well, that could be, you know, a year from now, or who knows. You know, I'd love to see it resolved and they get that together, because I really need that. Okay, well, anyway, so for right now, I'm just running through 2 little Fender X2s with 10-inch speakers, you know. They're little 15-watt amps. Both amps have Cannabis Rex speakers in them, and their volume is at 4 here. Okay, so there's just a clean sound. All right, so now here we go. Let's check out some of the presets. This first one is kind of a stock one, really. I think I changed it a little bit from the factory preset, but not much. And Eventide H9, which I'm going to do now. Add a little bit of delay and reverb. I don't know if you can hear that, but it's almost distorting my speaker because it's so loud, right? And I mean, I'll check my global settings, but yeah, it's on instrument level, so big surprise. Now I've turned off the H9 for now. Tracking here is very good, and I mean, you could raise that up an octave and get this kind of okay, and that's pretty much a factory sound there, pretty much. Okay, now here's preset 2, which I don't remember exactly what it is, but okay, and now the Eventide. Preset 3. Using that arpeggiator. Here's preset 4, and preset 4 is one of my favorites, and surprisingly it's not a synth sound, and this is because, as I was telling you, the dry mode sounds really great when it's in dry mode, and the delay on it is fantastic and the filtering is fantastic. And you can definitely hear it here. And I have the mix at 49%. So half and half guitar and half synthesizer. It sounds like this. with it. Without the Eventide. It's true on this setting you do have your volume knob on your guitar because it's half of it's the guitar signal. Here's preset 5. Here's another arpeggio, or arpeggiator sound. Now with the arpeggiator, you know, I haven't really delved into it all that much, just kind of messing around. And while I love that sound, musically it would be good in like a loop kind of thing. You know, but playing wise, let's say I was just playing, okay, just those little double stops here. Okay, so you hear the difference there. It can be used musically, you know, but it's the same. And here's the thing, you know, playing-wise, skill-wise, it doesn't take much, you know. I mean, you can hit one string and it'll really sound cool with that arpeggiator. Alright, anyway. So let's see what else I came up with. Here's another preset. Okay, now when you hear that kind of sound right there, the reason it's doing that, I kind of hear filtery sound. That's because it's not in polyphonic mode, right? It's in monophonic mode. In other words, single notes. Right? Okay, so there's a pretty basic monophonic sound, right? And for some reason, this one has really good tracking. And when you add the Eventide, here's what you get. And I'm saying the Eventide, but it's really just, you know, any delay or reverb, that kind of thing. And all of a sudden you get this kind of. And then if you really want to go crazy with another preset, you can get. Now that's the Eventide doing stuff. Here's a preset. Alright, so that's actually preset 7 there. And that is monophonic, so when you play a chord, you get that kind of stuff. Single notes, you get that. Blade Runner type deal. 8. Let's see. Oh yeah, this was kind of a weird sound I found. I thought it was interesting. Dry mode, where it replaces a synthesizer with a pitch shifter. So you get this kind of a bass. And let's turn on the Eventide. Or we can swell that note in. Cool. Preset 10. So that's a super high-pitched kind of a... Okay, so anyway, you know, it's a work in progress, but the sounds you get are just astounding, really. You know. Now, for the video, I try to turn those X2s up, and that's the thing. The volume is just too loud, and I think that definitely that 6 dB cut would help a great deal. Yet Meris won't perform the modification right now because of that virus, which is just a big mess, you know. So in any case, so this is the Meris Enzo with MIDI, and I find it very usable, but you really have to be careful, because it can easily get away from you, is a good word for it, you know. When you make a change and that kind of thing, you know, so you definitely want to save those presets, because the little tiniest change and that's it, it's gone, you know. And sometimes I suppose the software needs to sync with the unit, you know, especially when I was doing the expression pedal and playing around and things, you know. And those presets, I mean, those are not set in stone. Those are just ones I've come up with, you know, I thought were interesting. But I haven't really fleshed them out, you know, into my setup. And that's the thing. With this pedal, this is not a plug-and-play pedal. I've said it over and over again. The Meris Enzo, you really need to sit down and play with it. And learn to use it, and it really takes a long time, especially to get sounds you're happy with. And I could see how someone who gets one would be overwhelmed and confused, you know. And certainly I was certainly that way, and I'm still that way, even with the MIDI. Still very confusing pedal, and the fact that they didn't put a volume, you know, software knob at least, you know, so you could set it for every preset, because you know the volumes vary so greatly, is a real downfall of this pedal, and other pedals have to compensate for that, or a volume pedal, that kind of thing. However, the sounds are just outstanding, you know, especially for the kind of stuff I do anyway. Any ambient or soundtrack type things, this pedal would be ideal for that. Okay. I think I'll eventually have a part 3 where I really ironed out some issues and really got to know the pedal a little better and be able to incorporate it into my setup, you know. Here I'm just, you know, experimenting, finding out what kind of sounds it can make, you know, what kind of sounds you can get of it. And one thing that's totally surprised me is that the effects in this thing are great. You know, just on regular guitar, without any synthesizer stuff. So that's an avenue to pursue just in itself, you know. So still a long ways to go for me. Though I've already done some recordings with it, and it's been fine. And somehow, one way or another, I'll get that volume issue resolved, you know. And I'm sorry, but, you know, telling me, well, you know, the other thing is, volume-wise, that's something they really need to address, and maybe that modification will make the difference. And, you know, if it's part of the mix knob, that means that it would be MIDI controllable via preset, which would be really fantastic if that's the case. Unfortunately, I kind of got stuck here, you know, with one that doesn't have that modification. And as a result, you know, volume's all over the place. And that's what I found, especially with tube amps, where you have to turn them up, you know, to play guitar. It overwhelms the amp, you know, and overdrives it when you don't want it to, and the speakers kind of fart out and stuff, you know, as a result, because of the wide dynamic range of the pedal. So the volume has to be addressed, that volume issue, I'm sorry. And it sounds like they may have, but as long as they're not willing to do the modification, you know, I'm pretty much SOL and I have to rely on other ways, you know, so that's kind of a bummer, really. The other thing is that endless type of sounds, depending on what you're going for, especially in context, you know, looping for me, you know, looping wise and things. You can create a, you know, synth pad, or, you know, even special effects. And that's the one thing I found with the arpeggiator. I mean, I totally love that sound, you know. But you would think you'd be playing more, you know, to get the sound, but you're not. I suppose that's, you know, what keyboard players do. You know, I mean, when they're using an arpeggiator, they're really only pressing one note or a chord or something, you know, it's doing all this stuff. You know, which is okay, it's fine, but I'd always imagine somebody was, you know, playing it. I mean, I guess some do, I don't know. You know, anyway, but it's a cool thing. It really, you know, when they say it's an instrument, it is an instrument, without a doubt. And yeah, that's why I thought one last thing is the factory presets. You know, they're terrible, really. They're not very good at all. However, they do showcase some of the sounds that the pedal can make, and it's a good starting point. But without a question, I wouldn't rely on the factory presets. I'd definitely spend the time to create your own. And herein, again, is a, you know, a fallacy of this pedal, is that presets, right? So the two issues are presets and volume. That's it. You know. And learning to use it, you know, that you have to tune the guitar up to pitch and so on. So I'm glad I got this pedal. And several times, I've thought of returning it, or just say forget this and just sell it and be done with it. But I think it's worth it. I think over time I'm seeing sounds I really want to use and am able to use. But, you know, it takes some time to sit down and really learn it. So there's definitely a learning curve here. You know, that's the thing. Okay, very good. See you next time.